So when I first moved to Lake Havasu City back in 2016, I happened to take over the lease for the guy that I was replacing at work, and I moved into his roommate, with his roommate who was also a coworker, and bought his furniture, and everything seemed to go so seamless. It was so easy. We had a lakeside view. We were right across the street from Body Beach. I don't know if any of you guys have been to Havasu, but we got to see the gorgeous sunsets from our balcony, and the people just, although older, more retirees and snowbirds, they seemed so nice. Until one day, there was a neighbor that lived down the hall from where I lived, and she would always say hi to me, depending on how busy I'd seemed that day. She would, try to ask me what I was doing, what I was up to, and we chit-chat in the hallway. And one day, coming home from work, I called my mom for something. I don't remember what we were talking about, but I was on the phone, and I saw my neighbor coming out, and so I did the whole head nod, little wave, and she heard me talking in Spanish, which is my native language. She looked down, pretended I wasn't walking down the hall, walked right past me, and then never spoke to me again. And that was, I've dealt with racism before, but that was one of the most glaring ones that was right to my face. And it was the first time I was like, wait, I might be in a place where I don't feel that welcome. And what surprised me the most is that when I first moved to Arizona 4 years ago, I assumed it's a border state. There's diversity. People are welcoming and more accepting. But when I first moved to Arizona, I moved to Nogales. And coming from McAllen, Texas, which is another border town, I felt familiar there. I felt sort of at home. But once I moved to Havasu, I felt different, and I felt like the outsider. And it sort of surprised me, but at the same time, I guess it shouldn't have, because the only knowledge I had of Arizona before moving here was the Senate Bill 1070, which is the controversial immigration law that allowed enforcement officers to ask people for their documentation if they suspected that they were undocumented. And while Havasu is 90% white, there was a Mexican community. So then I thought, you know what, let me try to feel at home with them. I actually tried going to church, and they had one Spanish mass. Their priest did not speak Spanish, so they started canceling it. The Mexicans there didn't quite feel very Mexican. The older generations avoided speaking Spanish, and the younger generations didn't really know how to speak anything but English. And it almost seemed like they were trying to blend into the majority and push aside what made them different and made them special. There was this one time that I was talking to a lady, and we were talking about the new Mexican restaurant in town. She asked me where it's at. And I said, oh, it's on Palo Verde, just west of 95. She's like, where? I was like, Palo Verde. No, like, you must be wrong. And I was like, no, I just went there yesterday. It's on Palo Verde. And then something clicked. And I was like, Palo Verde? And she was like, why didn't you just say it like that all along? And I'm sorry, but Spanish being my first language, my instinct is to pronounce Spanish words in Spanish. And it's something that I've never thought about, because growing up in McAllen and living in Nogales, there were days where I wouldn't speak any English. There were days where 75% I was speaking Spanish. At home, I still speak Spanish because my mom doesn't know any English. So when I lived in Nogales, Tucson was like the big city. Go visit on the weekends, the city getaway, go have fun. I was luckily adopted by this extended family that lives all throughout here, southern eastern Arizona. And so that was where we come and hang out. While I lived in Havasu, it became the place that I escaped to run away from the daily racism, sexism, bigotry. I lived in Havasu for 14 months, and I think I came to Tucson at least 5 times. You're talking about a 5-hour drive. So because of the toll it took on my mental health to live in Havasu, and then they eventually started cutting our hours at work, I had taken on a second job. I was a cleaning lady at a bar, which some of my friends also took as a joke. I was like, oh look, the Mexicans cleaning. And I started keeping an eye out for job opportunities in Tucson, just because I already knew the area, I knew I liked it, I have friends and family that live here, and when a job opportunity did come up, I jumped at it. and Poli's here, he can tell you how much I was interested in working down in Tucson. And the moment I moved down here, the day after, I went to Food City, walked in, was grabbing some stuff, and an employee greeted me in Spanish. And just that simple interaction made me want to cry because I realized how much I missed it. That weekend, I walked in the Alsos procession, and it made me feel so special how welcoming the city is to the Mexican culture and heritage and just wanting to accept it. Looking around here, the Mexican restaurants aren't trying to please a certain group of people. There's Mexican restaurants, there's carnicerias, there's tortillerias. People can be unapologetically Mexican here. And it felt like I could finally breathe and just be myself. I didn't have to hide my Mexicanness. So I understand Tucson's not perfect. I know that. Shortly after I moved here, I did also go on a couple dates with this guy who told me he does not go to Southside Tucson because that's where people steal cars. I'm pretty sure my car will still be outside when we leave. I don't know. But Tucson does have a way of just like opening its arms and welcoming people who are different and helping people from all types of backgrounds and just bringing them in. And I've been at the Old Pueblo for 2 years, or almost 2 years. And I'm not sure how much longer I'll be here, but now when people from back home or people that I knew along the way that ask me like, how's Tucson like? Or tell me about Tucson. I can tell them it's a lovely town where deserts meet the mountains and where the heat is broken up by monsoon storms and people are so welcoming and try to help their neighbors rather than avoid them in hallways. And this is where I made my home. Thank you.